There aren't many great science fiction writers who have truly impacted science fiction quite as much as Isaac Asimov, who changed the way we saw the future. Asimov made a number of predictions on artificial intelligence and robotics that are now starting to become a reality, not just science fiction. And with today's advancements in robotics, it seems that the future that Asimov predicted is finally here.
And humans and robots get along?
I think people will become very close to their artificial intelligence, using them to expand the knowledge of their own minds.
Isaac Asimov, between 1940 and 1950, wrote a series of short science fiction stories that focused on robotics, which appeared in the science fiction magazines Super Science Stories and Astounding Science. These short stories were eventually incorporated into a standalone novel by Asimov called I, Robot, which was published in 1950. These stories focused on Dr. Susan Calvin, a chief robopsychologist at US Robots and Mechanical Men Incorporated, a major manufacturer of robots, telling each of her stories about her life's work to a reporter who acts as the narrator. In writing this collection of short stories, Asimov was greatly inspired and influenced by a 1939 short story of the same name by Eando Binder, which was in fact a pseudonym of Earl and Otto Binder. Originally, Asimov wanted to title his series Mind and Iron, and was strongly against naming his short stories after the 1939 short story. I, Robot was a morality tale about humans' interaction with robots, which was combined into a much bigger story, documenting the behaviour of robots within their positronic brain, which is the robot's internal processor. This was referenced many times in the series Star Trek The Next Generation in relation to the android Data, whose internal processor is called a positronic brain. The I, Robot series was also the first time the 3 laws of robotics were mentioned. These 3 laws would revolutionize the way we saw robots.
I'm interested, and I think everybody is interested in the 3 laws of robotics. Could you explain those?
Well, back in 1939, I began writing robot stories. And by the time I'd written 2 and 3, there was a pattern in these stories which John Campbell, the editor of Astounding Science Fiction and my literary father, pointed out to me. He said I was having my robots behave as though they were guided by 3 laws. The first law was that a robot couldn't hurt a human being, or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. The second law was that a robot had to obey orders given it by human beings, provided that didn't conflict with the first law. And the third law was that a robot had to protect its own existence, except where that would conflict with the first 2 laws. And after that, I always used them, and the stories evolved out of those 3 laws, out of the mutual contradictions, out of the ambivalences, the incongruities, and so on.
The 3 laws have been referenced countless times in movies and TV shows. The first true depiction of these laws were first made mention of in the classic 1956 film Forbidden Planet, with its depiction of the robot character Robbie, where his master, Morbius, demonstrates Robbie's capabilities working under the 3 laws. In the TV series Doctor Who, these laws are made reference to in the 1977 story The Robots of Death, which makes mention of the first rule: it is forbidden for robots to harm humans. In the 1986 movie Aliens, the android Bishop quotes one of the robot laws in a scene, saying, "It is impossible for me to harm, or by omission of action, allow to harm a human being." iRobot introduced the AI, Vicky, who gains control, putting the needs of the robots above humans. The free will and individuality of robots is also something expressed in iRobot. Can a robot think for itself and have free will? This idea that robots should have free will and be individuals is touched upon in the Star Trek Next Generation episode I, Borg, where we see engineer Geordie LaForge befriending and teaching a Borg who has been separated from the collective about being an individual and having free will and purpose. The Borg even has its own name, Hugh. 3 of the short stories from iRobot were adapted for television. The first was a 1962 series titled Out of This World, which was hosted by Boris Karloff in the episode called Little Lost Robot. In the anthology series, The Outer Limits, in the original and the remade series in 1995, the episodes are both titled iRobot. These episodes were loosely based on the Asimov novel, with Leonard Nimoy featuring in both versions of the episodes. Plans were made by Warner Brothers in the late 70s to make a feature film, but there were no acceptable scripts, with the exception of a script written by Harlan Ellison, who worked with Asimov to create a version which would truly capture the spirit of the original story. Asimov stated that this screenplay would lead to the first really adult, complex, worthwhile science fiction movie ever made. Ellison would broaden the scope of the original story, but focus more on character development. Ultimately, though, making the film would be deemed too expensive, especially with the limited technology of that time, so the studio would abandon the project. Some years later, the project was picked up again by Walt Disney Pictures, who wanted Bryan Singer to direct, but 20th Century Fox, several years later, would acquire the rights. They hired writer Jeff Vintar, along with Akiva Goldsman, as co-writer, to write the first draft of the screenplay. Goldsman tailored the script for star Will Smith, adding one-liners and over-the-top action scenes to the screenplay where he could. Vintar based the screenplay on his 1995 screenplay, Hardwired, which was loosely based on Asimov's short story series. Originally, the film would have no connection with Asimov's iRobot, and Fox would fire Vintar from the project, but rehire him a number of months later. Vintar would spend several years working on the screenplay and turn the story into a futuristic Agatha Christie-style murder mystery, adding action-packed scenes to cater for a big-budget studio film. He would name the script iRobot, incorporating Asimov's 3 laws of robotics, replacing a number of characters from the original story. Vintar had constant clashes with the studio over the screenplay and left the project, stating that the script was a complete mess and could not be fixed. Vintar would still receive story credit, with some of the original lines kept in the final movie. Writers Lawrence Connor, Mark Rosenthal were hired to write the final screenplay, with Akiva Goldsman. Unfortunately, the script drew away from the integrity and the vision of Asimov's story. Studio executives at Fox blamed this on the then studio head, Tom Rothman, who is credited for keeping his bad ideas in the final script. The final script would retain some elements of the characters and ideas of the original story, but most of these ideas of Asimov's original vision, plot and story elements were heavily adapted and changed. Part of the main plot bears similarities to the plot of Binder's short story, iRobot, where we see a robot put on trial for the murder of his creator in a closed room with no witnesses. The end credits would list the film as suggested by the book iRobot by Isaac Asimov. The film renamed the original story's corporation name, US Robots and Mechanical Men, to US Robotics. In the film, the robot Sonny attains a true consciousness the moment he discovers the dead body of his creator. The scene where Sonny is hiding in a sea of identical robots is based on a scene in the short story Little Lost Robot. There are also many tie-ins with Asimov's other fictional works. For example, Sonny's struggle and desire to understand humanity resembles the robot protagonist, Andrew Martin, in the novel The Bicentennial Man, which ties in with Asimov's iRobot. In terms of setting, the Bicentennial Man spans a time period of 200 years in the robot Andrew Martin's life. The character Susan Calvin appears in Chapter 13 of the novel. Calvin is in fact seen as a patron saint of all roboticists. According to iRobot, Susan Calvin was born in the year 1982 and died at the age of 82, either in 2064 or 2065. This suggests that the earliest events of the story take place somewhere between the 2050s and early 2060s during the events of iRobot. The Bicentennial Man was later turned into a film in 1999 and starred Robin Williams as Andrew Martin, the robot, who wants to live and die like a human. The 3 laws of robotics are also stated in the film. In iRobot, Sonny's dream about a man coming to liberate the NS5s alludes to the novel Robot Dreams, which is also a collection of short stories by Isaac Asimov, which also features the character Susan Calvin, who discovers a robot who dreams. iRobot is a science fiction murder mystery and action film set in the dystopian future of 2035, where robots are public servants who are operating under the 3 robot laws in order to keep humans safe. Homicide detective Del Spooner, who hates robots, investigates an apparent suicide of a robotics scientist, Dr. Alfred Lanning. Spooner doesn't believe it was a suicide, but murder. He questions a number of suspects, one of them being a humanoid-looking robot named Sonny, who is different from the other robots, who can dream and experience emotion. But as he digs deeper, he starts to uncover that the company, USR, has hidden agendas, and that there is a much larger threat to humanity. Australian director Alex Proyas, who directed The Crow, would be hired by 20th Century Fox to direct. Fox wanted an exciting action-orientated film, moving away from the original short stories of Asimov. For the lead character, Detective Spooner, Denzel Washington was approached. He turned it down to star in The Manchurian Candidate. Arnold Schwarzenegger was also originally attached to the project, but due to scheduling conflicts, had to turn down the role. After a long casting process, Will Smith was cast in the role. Smith at this time was one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood, and with Will Smith on board, the studio knew they had a bona fide hit on their hands. With the film, director Proyas wanted Smith to be more serious. Bridget Monahan was cast as Dr. Susan Calvin, who was the principal character in the original stories of Asimov. Bruce Greenwood and James Cromwell also co-starred in the film. For the part of Sonny, a number of actors were considered, including actors Will Wheaton and Emilio Estevez, but it was talented character actor Alan Tudyk who was cast in the role of Sonny. For the robot Sonny, the effects team used the process of motion capture, with Tudyk providing the body movements. Tudyk also provided the voice. The film was produced with a budget of $120 million, with no reshoots required, which was unheard of for a Hollywood blockbuster film. However, in post-production, director Alex Proyas had a difficult time with the 20th Century Fox studio head, Tom Rothman, who threatened to have the film's ending edited out and demanded more jokes be put in just days before the film's premiere.
You know, I had a miserable experience working with 20th Century Fox on iRobot, and Will and I got along really well. And in fact, I came close to walking off that movie several times, and I only really continued because I really enjoyed working with Will. Will's a great guy.
iRobot was released in the US on July the 16th of 2004. Regardless of the success of the test screening, the producers and directors, who loved the complexity of the script, felt greatly disappointed after seeing the film at the premiere, because they felt the film could have been far better. The film grossed $346 million worldwide, coming second place just behind Spider-Man 2 at the box office. To me, after re-watching the film, the greatest scenes are the scenes with Tudyk as Sonny and there were some inklings of Asimov's original stories brought into the film. Although the film was a huge hit with audiences, iRobot received mostly bad reviews, with the only praise given to the visual effects and the acting. Asimov purists widely dismissed the film, saying it had nothing to do with the book. There were some nice little moments in the film, where tribute is paid to Isaac Asimov. The ending of the film, where Sonny has to lead the robots after they become free, was the most genuine scene in the film, and shows that the robots have free will and don't need to be slaves to the humans anymore. The film does have its fan base and was still a success with audiences, and the film actually has inspired real-life roboticists who have stated that they were inspired by the film to achieve real advancements in robotics, and papers have been written on how the movie actually holds true to Asimov's concepts and ideas, exploring the nature of the 3 robot laws. Isaac Asimov's literary works were so important to science fiction and have inspired us to dream bigger and look to the future. My name's Jonathan. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this video, please remember to subscribe if you haven't already. And if you like what you see on my channel and would like to support me on Patreon, click on the link below.